Welcome back to the Athlete Lab podcast, where we discuss athlete development, the coaches, the players, and all the people around it that make elite performance happen. Today, I'm very excited to be joined by Topher Scott. Topher is the founder of the Hockey Think Tank podcast. He was a 100-point player at Cornell University, went on to coach in the college level, and has done a number of other things in the sport. But most of all, he's passionate about hockey. And Topher's one of my favorite people in our game, and I'm really pumped to have him on as a guest today.
I'm pumped to be here. Right back at you, one of my favorite people in the game. So let's go, baby.
All right, before we get started, I got to share this story because it's one of my favorite in hockey. Middle of June, 2014, super hot day in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. I was moving my apartment by myself, packing everything up. And I go to Panera Bread, and it's kind of sweaty, gross, midday. And Topher Scott, a man who I'd known for about 6 months, I met in a rink, just talking hockey. He was scouting and working. He was assistant coach at Cornell. He was there scouting at camp. I was moving to go back to Detroit. Topher was there with Julian Pagliaro and Cody Campbell, and they're like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm moving my apartment." They had a 4-hour break between games. Led by Topher, those three guys came over and helped me move our apartments. I share that because at that time, we weren't friends, we were acquaintances. That was one of the things, the hockey people, it's just something different. It was one of the nicest things anybody's ever done, and I might still be dragging furniture out of that Cedar Rapids apartment if it wasn't for your help. So I really appreciate that, man.
Hey, man, that's one of the coolest things about the hockey world. Just so many good people, and when we put our hand up to help you, it's because we learned that from somebody else. Somebody did that for us at some point in our journey. And so, yeah, just the selflessness of so many people in our game is really, really cool. It's about the people. And, yeah, it's so funny that you still think about that story because it's it was hot day in Cedar Rapids for sure, but it's more than happy to do it, and there's so many good people in the hockey world.
Oh, you said it, and I've said this about other sports. I hope that other sports have as many good people as hockey does, because I think we are so incredibly fortunate. And going back to your history, your finalist for the Hockey Humanitarian Award, and you've kind of been renowned with leadership your entire career, coming up and coaching and what you're doing now. What was this something you were born with? Is there somebody who said, someone taught you that? When did that kind of become part of your DNA?
That's a great question. I think growing up, service was always something that my family was very passionate about. I remember when I was a young kid and, my grandfather built a company up from nothing into a pretty successful company. And, my parents worked for it and my aunts and uncles and everything like that. And so, financially we were okay. And with that, it was our responsibility, the way that I grew up, to kind of give back. And I'll never forget, every Christmas going to a soup kitchen, a couple Christmases growing up where we would actually go. We went to it was a house of kids that basically were abused by their parents and were taken away by social services, and this was kind of like their house that they were living at. And we would go there at Christmas time and bring them, all these presents. My grandparents would kind of lead the charge, and it was such an amazing experience to see these kids who had gone through all these hardships and didn't have anything really positive. And then we would come and kind of play Santa and give them a day where they were, at the top of the world, right? And so my grandparents specifically and into my parents, into us, they were always very service oriented. And so I can count numerous different opportunities that we've had, and I've just been surrounded by so many people that have taught me the value of service, not just in giving to others, but just the life lessons that you learn yourself of doing it too. And I've always tried to live that through, and not always perfect with it, but it's I've been very, very blessed with the family that I was brought up in. I'll say that for sure.
I mean, that's environment. I think a lot of times in development, you talk about environment, we think on the ice or on the field or in the gym, but the environment your parents and grandparents, in your case, set for you. That's really, really cool. And it's cool. You acknowledge that they built the company. You grew up fortunate, but giving back, that's awesome. Well, that explains a lot. Athlete development. So I've heard, and you've written stuff, and I've seen a lot of, your viewpoint on athlete development, and you're extremely passionate about creating that right environment for kids. And kind of what's your overarching belief on athlete development? And we can stay in our lane with hockey. Like, what things should be pillars of a good athlete and hockey player development model?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think we don't focus enough on life skills when it comes to developing elite athletes. We focus too much on hockey. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't focus on hockey because that's ultimately the sport that we're in. But when I think about, and you and I both, right, have been very fortunate to be around the best of the best in our game, the best of the best coaches, the best of the best players, and I've been fortunate now to have this even wider, and you're in youth hockey as well, like to see kind of how that happens, even from like the ground up. And I think when you think about, like, at least for me, the similarities and the commonalities of an elite athlete. Obviously, let's put talent aside. These people have been blessed by God with some things that some of us will never have. But I think of two things specifically. Number one is every elite athlete that I've been around loves the game. They all absolutely love the game. They love the game of hockey. It's not work to them. They have a passion for it. It's fun for them. And I think when you have that, you know, anytime you want to be elite at anything, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be a lot of adversity. And when you have a passion for it and you love it, you're much more apt to persevere through some of the tough stuff, right? So like I think just an overall love for the game is one thing that we, again, you talk about environments, like what kind of environment are we creating as adults? We're kids, and even at the NHL level, you work at the NHL level, keeping it fun and keeping it positive is a huge thing that they talk about in coaches room in the grind of an 82 game season. So like how can we make it fun? How can we make it exciting? I think so. Number one, how can we help these kids to continue to develop a love for the game? And then I think the other one that I've really been talking a lot about lately, Phil, is ownership and accountability. I think every elite athlete that I've been around, for the most part, let's call it 96% of the 100, they don't make excuses. They don't make excuses or point fingers or blame other people when things don't go their way. They take accountability and ownership for everything that they do. The good stuff, they take accountability and ownership for it. The bad stuff, they take accountability and ownership for it. And they really look in the mirror, and when things aren't going right, what can I do to get better? How can I focus on the things that I can control and really kind of like chart my own path to get out of whatever rut that I'm in. And I feel like that more and more is becoming less of a norm. I think it's really, really easy to make excuses. I think it starts from the parents and it starts from the adults too, because when we make excuses for our kids, what does that do? Well, it gives them an example of people making excuses, and they're going to do the same thing. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. And so I think us as adults have to do a much better job, operators, coaches, parents, everybody, of really living that, taking ownership and accountability for things that we can control, and then teaching and showing our kids to do the same.
When you talk about that, with like, it's almost like a parents can accidentally sabotage the environment. Like, what advice would you give to a parent and their kid gets in the car and they're going home from a game or a practice, and maybe it's gone great or not great, and I think they both might kind of present opportunities. Like, what type of advice would you give to someone at organization you're working with? I know part of what you do is go to organizations and try to help them build their culture. What type of things do you try to teach?
Yeah, so it's really interesting. So we actually have a car ride home sheet that we give to the parents, or they have access to. And like, because we're really big believers in the car ride home. On our podcast, like we always ask like the NHL players who we get on, like, what was the car ride home like when you were a kid? Because we think it's really important conversation. And I think when you talk about tips for like what that potentially can be, or like how a parent can help support their kid, love and support, number one. Love and support your kid. Don't coach them. Like, you know, it's really sad, Phil. Like, so I get in front of a lot of parents, and I like to ask questions too. It's not me just standing in front of them and telling them how they should parent their kids. That's not the goal. It's to help provide them some support of how they can help support their own kids. And one question I ask to every single parent group, and that question I ask them is, for all of you in this room, raise your hand if your kid, and it doesn't matter the age, 8U all the way up to 18U, raise your hand if your kid is way too hard on themselves. And dude, 70% full stop every time raise their hands. 70% of the parents that I talk to, they raise their hand that their kid is too hard on themselves. So then you think about why. Like, why is that? Right. And you talk about environment. We have put kids in an environment where it's way too professional at way too young of an age. They're coached on how to be a hockey player instead of how to have fun and learn to love the game to play hockey. And we've forgotten and don't put enough emphasis on the kinds of things that I believe really develop players. And that's the life skills side of it. And so like, your kids already based on the environments that they're in and how they're being coached and it's probably not just sports, it's probably academia and music and all these other things. Like it's just too professional, too fast. So what's the best thing that you can do? Love your kid. Like the best thing that you can say is, I love to watch you do what you love. I love to watch you play. Man, you had so much fun out there. And if they're not putting in effort or, they have bad body language or they're being a bad teammate, yeah, then be a parent and do that. But like, loving and supporting our kids, and I'm a new parent, so I'm learning this as I go. I'm certainly not an expert, but like, I just feel like when I look at so many of the kids that I've been around that have gone on to be an elite athlete, man, their parents were low maintenance. Their parents they weren't the ones calling the coaches. Their parents were the one where it was the kid's journey, not theirs. And so the biggest thing is like honestly just loving and supporting your kid, being there for them through the good times, through the tough times, helping them to learn the life lessons that can help them to become not just better people, but I think better hockey players, and really putting the focus on that and not trying to curate, a pro hockey player at 10 years old. Like surround them. Like the best thing you can do as a parent is surround your kid with good people who are going to allow them to fall in love with the game, people who are going to hold them accountable to a high standard, people who are going to help them to understand what it means to be a part of a team. This isn't just your journey, it's our team's journey. You're a big part of that. Like how can you be a good teammate and stuff? So yeah, like just loving and supporting your kid, car ride home, don't be a coach, and just do what you can to help your kid fall in love with it.
Yeah. The 70% of families who think their children are too hard on themselves is scary. But that's those are really good points. It kind of leads to the next thing I want to talk about. You're known for leadership and culture and like helping build that. If we were to talk in the culture word, it's one of those things that gets thrown around quite a bit, but I think it might be it's a little bit obscure as far as how do you develop it? Like is there one thing or two things you could share that like coaches could help build the culture in their team as we are in the year, looking into next season, the 26-27 season? Like what's a culture thing that coaches can start to kind of wrap their heads around?
Oh, dude, like you're gonna put the quarter in the jukebox here. Like I love talking about this stuff. I'll give you a couple things. So one, and this is something I heard not too long ago, but I think it really is like a really profound thing. And I can't remember who said it or where I read it. Maybe it was on a podcast, but the line was, love is an act. Love is a verb, not a noun. Love is a verb, not a noun. And any culture that I've been very fortunate in my career, both as a coach and as a player, to have played on and coached championship teams. And so when I think about like what are the commonalities of all those teams, it was culture, right? Like I was on more talented teams that didn't win when the culture wasn't right. I was on less talented teams with better culture that did win because of it. Like, right. So like, and to me, the binding thing of all of it is just love. And love is not a noun. It's not something you have or you don't. It's something that you do. So like the time and effort that you put into the culture. And so when I'm working at Michigan a couple years ago with NAR, right? A big part of my job was leadership and culture. That was a huge part of my role on the staff. And so I would meet with our captain pretty much weekly. And the only question that I would ask him that would facilitate the start to the conversation was, his name was Nolan Moyle, unbelievable kid. Like on a scale from 1 to 10, how tight are we as a group right now? That was the first question that I would ask him, and then the conversation would go from there. And the greatest part about it is every week that I would ask him that question, it was never the same number. Why? Because culture is a verb. It's not a noun. It's something that gets better or worse based upon the time, effort, and intention that you put into the personal relationships of your club. And so when I think about like culture and when I do my team building with different teams, I was actually just up in Ferris not too long ago. When I think about culture, I ask them 3 questions. And if you can answer yes to all 3 of these questions, you have the opportunity to, number one, have a great culture, and number two, win a championship. If you can, if the answer to any of these is no, then you're not going to win a championship, and your culture is going to suffer from it. So how can we put in the work to make those no's a yes? And so the first question I ask is, how tight are you, right? Like, how close are you as a group? Do you guys hang out outside of the rink? Do you play for the thing on the front of the jersey? Do you buy into the team systems? Like, do you love being around each other at the rink and away from the rink? That's where that love comes from. So that's number one. Number two is, are you the hardest working practice team that you're going to play against this year? The hardest working practice team in the country. Every championship team that I've ever been a part of, practices were harder than the games. The standard for compete was so high in practice that like the other teams couldn't match it. Right. So like I can watch your team practice and tell you flat out if your team is going to be a championship team or not. And what I tell kids a lot too, when I'm doing this with the younger kids, is you'd be shocked at how many colleges have live barn accounts, not to watch you play in games, but to watch you practice at the end of the day. And so like, are you the hardest working practice team in your league? And then the last one is, are you the most resilient team in the league? You cannot win a championship without going through tough times. And I've been on a lot of teams where when the tough times came, there was a lot of excuse making and finger pointing and blaming. And those teams never won. And those cultures were never healthy. But the ones that I've been a part of, when the tough stuff revealed how much we loved each other as a group. And I think question 3 and question 1 go hand in hand when it comes to how tight are we and how resilient are we. Winning a championship is really, really hard. You know, being an elite athlete is really, really hard. And the choice that you make and how to see the hard as a group or as an individual, ultimately, I think is one of the biggest determining factor on how far you're going to make it in this game and in life. And so like when it comes to culture, it's a verb. You have to put effort into it. It doesn't just happen. Yes, if you recruit better people into your program, it's going to be a lot easier to develop culture. But like you have to be intentional and you have to put a lot of time and effort into building it. So sorry, that's probably too much than what you were asking for, but I'm very like that this it's everything to me.
Having those 3 questions, and I think that that's a really good simplified way for coaches to think about it and to share that with their teams. If they go back to that's incredible. And I want to go back to something you kind of talked about earlier about the accountability and like player ownership. You know, a player can take ownership for what they're doing, but when their confidence, you know, that's a hard thing to take ownership for, you know, and their resilience. How do you teach that, the ability to take ownership when it's coming to like, you need to be confident to be good, but you know, sometimes like, how do you develop confidence? It gets to be gray. Like, how do you coach players and coaches through that?
That's a great question. I mean, confidence ultimately is like the thing that, you know, it's everything to a player, to a coach, to a team. If you're confident in your abilities, you're much more going to be able to reach your potential. No doubt. And I'll go to Vex on this one. For people that Jeff Lavecchio I do my podcast with, he's a strength coach, unbelievable mentor, leader. Played 10 years pro, like just a guy that I look up to a lot. And he is so, as a leader, in the trenches with his players. He is so in the trenches with his players, and they understand that it's their journey, theirs and theirs alone. And he is there almost as like a shepherd to help them along the way. And so the amount of intention that he puts into goal setting with the players, the amount of attention he puts into getting to know what makes his players tick and what motivates them, and just the overall enthusiasm that he has for his players that he ultimately affects, it's contagious. Like honestly, it's really, really contagious. So when you think about how do you get confidence, it's earned. Like confidence is earned through the real confidence anyway, right? Like there's confidence that you can get from getting lucky, but like that doesn't last very long. The real confidence is kind of mastery in your craft and earning that through the work that you put in. So as a coach or as a leader, how invested are you into the planning of that player's journey? How invested are you into helping them to understand that it's about the things that they can control and being a support for them in the things that they can control, and then ultimately like setting the standard for what's acceptable on your team. Like they talk about, there's this book, it's called 10 to 25. This guy wrote it named David Yeager. I don't know if you've read that. So you know exactly, right? So high standards and high support. you have to have really, really high standards for the groups that you have, but then you have to support people to make sure you help them to get to those standards through holding them accountable to them. And so um as a leader, as a coach, as a mentor, it's about helping them to understand that this is their journey and helping them to hold them to the accountable to the standards that have been set as a group. And that's ultimately the hardest thing I think to do as a coach. And just from experience, I think the hardest thing is your own consistency in holding people to those standards. Because we have bad days. We have days we show up to the rink and we don't have our best, especially young kids and family and life. But can you as a coach give 100 of whatever you have that day? And then, just being the example to those kids in that. So, it's with Vex, like the biggest thing that I've learned from him, it's really cool to watch him in a gym because a lot of his accountability that he does with his players is like, hey, your dream is to make the NHL. This is the standard that you think you need to get there. Do you think that you're living up to that today? Like, he puts it in their court. It's not like you're not living up to our standards. Like, hey, this is what you want. I'm helping you to get what you want. And so are you living up to your standard? And it's really cool to see. And he gets the most out of his players because of it. It's awesome.
That is cool. That's inspiring just to think that you say something like that and have the reality of the player put it back on. And it goes back to your ownership and accountability. Uh, I've read a lot and listened to some of the talk about the ideal environment for 8, 9, 10, 11-year olds. And we could probably speak, negatively about some of the realities around youth sports in general. Like, what would you say is optimal? You've seen kids go from when they start to the highest levels, as you mentioned, but what do you think is optimal? And what's something as youth organization leaders they could try to think about or maybe rethink or, be brave enough to bring up in different spots to kind of make the environment better for the next group of kids coming up?
Oh boy, that's a great question. There's a couple different ways we could go. So number one, I think in anything, it's got to be fun, right? Like, I think that's the standard answer. Like, the more fun you can make it, the more kids are going to fall in love with it, the more they're going to want to work at it. So, like, just creating an atmosphere of excitement and enthusiasm and fun, I think that needs to be, really important. Another thing and this is from Jason Guerrero. I know you know Jay. Like, he works with USA Hockey now, coached in college for a long time, great player in his day too. And he told me about a study that USA Hockey did on what fun means to a kid, and it was really interesting what came of that. And that was the kids thought fun was being challenged. That was the number one thing that they said was being challenged. And so when I heard that, I was like, dude, that is amazing. I love that so much, right? And so I think, like, how can we put these kids in an environment where they're going to love it and they're going to have fun? And then how can we challenge them? How can we push them outside their comfort zone? How can we understand, like, how to manipulate a practice? So there's going to be some success, there's going to be some failure, there's going to be some in the comfort zone, there's going to be out the comfort zone. And so, like, I think that was really interesting because I never would have thought of that, but I just absolutely, absolutely love that. And I think too, like, when you talk about environment, I think we have it so backwards in youth hockey in how we narrow the talent pyramid at such a young age. And, tier one hockey at 7 and 8 years old and the decline of the house league, it's almost like a swear word in sports now, house or rec hockey, when ultimately you look at the most successful models all over the world, including Minnesota, it's community based. We don't narrow the talent pyramid too fast. There's not as much pressure on families to feel like they have to jump into the craziness. And so from, like, a structural model standpoint, when you talk about what's the right environment, it's not professionalizing it at such a young age. And there's progression, right? It gets a little bit more serious as you get a little bit older and you want to narrow the talent pyramid as they get into their teenage years and stuff like that, no doubt. There is a place in hockey for best on best competition. However, when you talk about the growth of the game and you talk about the health of the culture of our game from a macro standpoint, the environment that we gotta have that hard discussion about and people need to be brave on is how are we offering this game to families at the youngest of ages in our game? That's a serious in my opinion, the biggest problem that we have, that if we solve it, there will be so many more better players. There will be so many more players just playing the game in general, and so many more happy families, staying in our game as opposed to leaving and choosing other sports.
It's almost like, what's their experiences, those three questions back. Like, is this experience great for the participant? And that ultimately, and I think that anybody's in a leadership role has it's a massive privilege, but it's also pressure, because the environment you create for the game is the future of it. If they're out of hockey by the time they're 9, then there isn't the future for it. So that's
Right.
those are really, really good
And
points.
and honestly, it's easy for me to talk about these things because I don't run a club, right? Like, I can educate, I can provide perspective, I can provide insight, but if there's going to be real change, it's going to come from the club operators. And it's going to come from club operators being brave and saying, "You know what? This is the way it's going. We don't really like the way it's going, and I'm going to put my foot down, and I'm going to do something different. And I'm going to put the kids first, because a lot of the decisions that are being made, and I don't think it's necessarily maliciously. I think most people in youth hockey actually try to make decisions that is in the best interest of the kids. However, there's such a pressure from a business standpoint and from like an adult ego standpoint, to create these super teams and to be number one on my hockey rankings and all this kind of stuff, because quote unquote, that's what we feel like parents want. And that's how we're going to keep our business alive. But it's not what's best for the kids. It really isn't. And so I think people know that, in their heart of hearts, but it is going to take program operators who are brave and to do things a little bit differently to help to rectify that.
It's so true. I want to change gears a little bit. Your time as a coach, I mentioned, like, that's how I met you. You were recruiting players for Cornell, and I was scouting for the USHL. Um, what is some of the misconceptions about college recruiting? What are some of the things that you think that you can share a message that could help parents along the way? Because I think with the social media, it can get a little bit dicey with all the expectations that are out there. So, what type of recruiting timeline and advice could you share with parents, coaches, and players?
It's a great question. And honestly, like, it's a hard question to answer right now because of all the changes that have happened in college sports over the past couple of years, with the recruiting pipeline opening up to, the CHL up in Canada, to the transfer portal, to the NIL. There's just been so many changes that the answer that I would give 2 years ago might be very different than the answer that I would give in 2 years, or even today. So, like, I wanna make sure that there's, like, an asterisk to that, because that answer could change based upon what's going on in college hockey right now as far as the recruiting landscape goes. I would say that, like, man, control what you can control, and don't compare your journey to anybody else's journey. That's the most important thing, right? And you mentioned social media. I know that there's kids that commit to schools just so they can put it on social media. I know there are kids that have committed to schools because the process is really stressful and they just want to get it over with. I know there's kids that commit to schools who are like, I'm just committing to this school because that's what I want to do, but I really don't want to go there. I want to go to a better school or a better pro. Like, every kid and what they want is different. Every school is different in how they approach recruiting, and so, like, I think just with that, when we talk about, like, don't compare your journey with everybody else's, like, guys, like, most journeys is the long way. The average age of a college freshman is 20. It's not 18. It's not 15, right? So, like, in your journey, like, maybe somebody that you're a peer with commits to a certain school and you haven't been getting that love. That's okay. First of all, there's a very good chance that that kid isn't going to go to that school at the end of the day, with how the recruiting landscape has come. And the other thing is, like, maybe you're not just not there yet. Just keep working. Control the things that you can control. So, like, it's a tough question from, like, a macro standpoint to really answer, because there's so much volatility in the market right now. But, like, man, don't compare yourself to other people. You're in your own journey, and the other thing too is, like, do you have any idea how many players get passed after they commit to schools? Right? So I almost think, in a weird way, because there's so much volatility in it, and like a verbal commitment really means nothing in today's landscape. Like if you're a kid that commits to a blue blood school, but you don't get any better from 16 to 18, they're not going to take you. They're going to take the kid who didn't get the commitment at 15 or 16, but worked like got, like they got pissed off and they worked harder and they took control of their journey. And those kids are better 18-year-old hockey players than the five-star recruit when they were 16. And teams are going to pick the 18-year-old better player over the 16-year-old five-star that didn't get better every day of the week, or the 20-year-old, right? That got better from 16 to 20 as opposed to a five-star recruit at 17. So like, run your own race, focus on the things that you can control, and understand that most kids go to school at 19 and 20 years old. So run the race to that line, not the 1 to 12, which some people are kind of thinking they have to run to now. I don't know. What do you think? Like you're in it and you're in youth hockey now. You talk to a lot of people. Like what's some of the feedback that you're getting on how we should be helping to support, these kids that have these dreams?
You just kind of use the line that, win the race to the right finish line. Kevin McLaughlin, former assistant executive director of USA Hockey, would say that often. I've got to the point where I think that there's multiple finish lines. It's like if your child starts playing hockey, like make sure they love hockey at 10U. Make sure they really love hockey at 14U, and they want to, it burns for them to get better. Now they've had a couple finish lines that they can really start like diving in. And I think if that's the focus, and you've said it so much, like take control what you can control. I've seen kids all the way up to getting drafted to the NHL and not being able to really put it all together to make a career even to 21 years old. I think that it's that like focus of what's happening right now is what's most important. So, being around the youth environment, that's what I'm a big proponent of, is making sure that everyone's focused on that environment where the kids are getting better, of course, but they love to play, and they love to play at a reasonable date in the future. Now, if you're 7, like focus on them loving to play when they're 10, and then when you get there, like let's really focus on them loving to play and continuing to get better at 14. And then let's take a deep breath and then like refocus, because I think that those will help, because it's hard. I think it's hard for all families because it's keeping up with the Joneses and it's everywhere.
Yeah, totally. And it's interesting you bring some of that stuff up. Like I remember having a conversation with a guy named Scott Young. I don't know if you really know Scott, but at the time, this was in like 2017, 2018, maybe. And I went up to Lake Placid to watch Cornell play. It was a year or two after I had left, and I went to go watch him play in the ECAC championships, and he was eating dinner kind of by himself at the bar at the restaurant. So I was like, hey, I want to talk some hockey. And it was interesting because he was the director of player development for Pittsburgh at the time. He's Stanley Cup champion. I think he won a Stanley Cup, but also played in the Olympics for the US, like just really good at what he does. And one of the questions I asked him was, you're director of player development. What makes an NHL player stick? So like you have players who get there and stay there, and then you have a lot of them who are up and down and they can't quite figure out how to stick. And in my mind, I'm thinking it's going to be like compete or hockey sense or, things like that. And his answer blew me away. And his answer was self-evaluation. If a player understands who they are, that's the most important thing to them sticking in a role in the NHL. If they have an honest evaluation of themselves as a player, of themselves as a person, on where they fit in the role that they play on the team. And I think that that's a great message even for this conversation that we're talking about. Maybe you are 16 and maybe you haven't gotten the reward of the offer or the commitment or making a junior team or whatever it may be. Be honest with yourself on why that is. And the reality is it's because you're not good enough yet. Like that's for 99% of the people, it's because you're not good enough yet. And there's something that you need to get better at. There's a part of your game, there's a part of your, your mental makeup, whatever it is that you need to improve upon to be able to get to that level. It's not because of politics or it's not because of X, Y, or Z. Okay, maybe let's be honest, there's a 1 to 5% that is like that. But ultimately, like if you haven't got the dream or the goal yet, it's because you got to be better. And so focus on getting better. We had Marty St. Louis on our podcast like years and years ago, and he said a line for me that was probably the greatest line that I've ever heard in the 7 years that we've been doing it. And he was like, Toph, I was never the biggest, I was never the fastest, I never had the best skill, I never had the best shot, but there was the one thing that I was the best at. I was the best at getting better. And I was like, dude, like if every single kid like bought into that, like it's again, it goes back to what's in my control. Like there's a reason why this guy is 5'9" and is a Hall of Famer. And this guy who was 5'9" didn't get drafted and didn't get signed into the NHL when he was done with college hockey and had to spend years in the AHL and then finally got like he had to get better. It wasn't because of somebody else's fault. Like look in the mirror, get better and work, get to work, man. So like yeah, it just I don't know what tangent we just went down, but like
But
again, it goes but in your control, get better and don't compare yourself to other people.
imagine if that was the culture. The culture of our team is every one of us is trying to be the best at getting better. Like that's powerful. What a great thing to hear from our
And it
team.
starts with the coach too.
Yeah.
Right? Like we talk lessons are caught, not taught. Like if I remember one of the things I really respected about Shafe, who I played for and worked with at Cornell, is like he was always like reading books and like he was always like, giving new things to us about like so you saw his commitment to wanting to get better. And that filters down. Like if you are a coach and you're so steadfast in your ways and you never change and do as I say, not as I do, like you're not going to get respect from the players and they're not going to want to do that. So like I think that starts in leadership positions as parents, that starts with coaches and program directors. Like we have to live that.
All the best coaches, and you mentioned earlier, we've been fortunate to be around the best in the game, and they all have that. They're always looking to learn more. They're always reading something. They've always got the most recent book that they think, or something that they read, or nuggets. And yeah, it's such a great thing. It starts there, and that's our challenge as leaders in the sport. We have to make sure that we're passing that along because I think that is something that will last into whatever profession you end up in. Whatever your job is. You guys, and that leads me to the next one. Like you started a podcast and it's obvious it's a labor of love, but you keep getting better and better and better at it. Like, tell me about like how that started. How did you get to that point? Like, what are the learning lessons? Cause it's awesome. I'm an avid follower and have been for a lot of years.
Appreciate that, man. Yeah, like it's funny. I was actually having this conversation with a couple neighbors of mine last night who are trying to start their own podcast. And so they asked me for some help and things like that. And like if you listen to like episode 1 that we did versus what we are now, like 7 years into it, you would like I would cringe like listening to year 1, right? Um Honestly, like one of the things that I've learned in doing this is authenticity and vulnerability are powerful things. Both of those two things are incredible. And when you're brave enough and willing enough to be yourself and share the good, the bad, and the ugly, when you're not trying to play an angle and you're just authentic, man. Like you're just yourself. And those are lessons that I think me and Vex we always want to be ourselves on the podcast. And we can tell with some of the guests, even like there are some guests who are like trying to sound good versus just like talking naturally, if that makes any sense. And so like, I think there's a lot of power in authenticity and vulnerability in a world of comparison culture that does not allow people the space to be authentic or vulnerable. Everybody's got an opinion on everything, and it's hard to put yourself out there. But I think that I love talking to people who are willing to share it all, and I think that connects people on a much more powerful basis because I think the people that try to sound smart don't connect with people because people are imperfect, man. Like everybody has their problems. Everybody has their insecurities. Everybody has their stuff that they're trying to improve upon and kind of work through. And so I really enjoy conversations like that are authentic, if that makes any sense. And people where people love to share, what they're actually thinking and feeling as opposed to like um trying to be an expert in the room.
That answer explains why it started as a podcast and now it's a movement in youth hockey education for families. So you guys have done a ton of great stuff. So I got one last question for you. One, like in one sentence or brief, like what makes the youth hockey experience better than anything?
The people. That's the easiest. That's the T. You just put me up on one. It's the people, man. We started the podcast with it. It looks like we're gonna, get close to ending it with it. There's just we can all look back at our journeys and we can all think about the people that helped us along the way that helped us to get there. There's some people that I wish weren't a part of my journey that caused some stress and anxiety. But at the end of the day, again, you can only control the things you can control. And those people were necessary parts of the journey, even though those parts of the journeys were tough ones to help us to be who we are today. And so, I think back of all the people that helped me and supported me and held me accountable, and I would not be here if it wasn't for them, and I would not be here without this game. I've been very fortunate to have had some amazing experiences, and this game has given me everything that I had in my life. I met my wife in college, and if it wasn't for hockey, I wouldn't have played hockey at that college. And I have three beautiful daughters, and like if I hadn't have met my wife, I wouldn't have those three beautiful daughters. And I think back to like the memories that have been created and the experiences that I've been able to have. The one consistency in all of them is that they were never by myself. They were always with other people. And so like what sets our game apart from the other ones, I think we have a truly unique, special breed of people in our game that sometimes give me a lot of gray hair and sometimes, cause a lot of stress. But ultimately at the end of the day, they're just great people. And we were down in Nashville, right? At the Congress at USA Hockey. For me, the most value I get out of going down to something like that is I'm reminded how many amazing people there are in our game. Volunteers, sacrificing their time to the betterment of the kids in our sport, trying to create a great environment like we've talked about for the kids. And we don't always get it right. But like it's really cool to see so many passionate people about our game and about the development of our kids in the game. And so I could have ended that in two words, the people, but yeah, man, and that's just we're a special breed. We're a little weird. We're a little out there, but it's a special breed.
I completely agree. I'd probably, if it wasn't for the people, I might still be in the Cedar Rapids apartment trying to get out of there. So, no, you're exactly right. Your experience, what you're doing now, it pays dividends for the sport that I don't think any of us will be able to quantify for years and years and years. So thanks for doing that. Really, really appreciate you being on today. And yeah, look forward to catching up again next time. And maybe you'll be in Nashville with some country music. So thanks a lot, Toph.
Thanks, Phil. Appreciate it.